while I'm having a wonderful life because I don't have to do that anymore. I want people to understand that it's an addiction and it's a lethal disease. You have to have the respect that it's a disease, it's an illness, and you really have to treat it with care, handle it with
Yeah.
care, so to say. And
Yeah.
it's real.
Mm.
And also progressive. There are so many things you need to learn about sugar addiction, but the most important thing is that you can recover from it.
You talk about recovery. What does that mean for you?
I went from surviving mode to start living. Um, my children sometimes they're like, "But you had us, you had us, you had something to live for." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I know. I had you, but even though I had you and loved you and cherished you, I wasn't alive. I was just surviving." And that means I mean that says a lot when you have two. At that point, I had two wonderful children. They were healthy. They were wonderful, and I weren't able to enjoy them. It was just
Mm.
work. Of course, I enjoyed them. I felt the love, and I cherished them. But it's not as deep as it is now because now I can really feel it. When you watch something, and it feels like your heart is moving or your soul is singing. I didn't have that then, but now it's like I'm almost overwhelmed with the love that I'm feeling and the um, the the being alive. It's hard to explain, and it's on all levels because for me, my addiction was actually mostly. Of course, I was overweight and I had a lot of. I was very young, not very young, but 28 when I entered my recovery. So I didn't have had all the consequences besides my mental health because
Right.
I didn't want to live. I had two wonderful children and I didn't want to live anymore.
Mm.
So that's where my addiction took me. And from going to that to accept that I have to eat in a certain way to recover, and to accept that I have to heal in mentally, physically, spiritually, socially, doing all the work. But it's so worth it. It's a hard job, but it's so worth it, really.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. So when did recovery actually start for you? Like, what was the process that led you to really, I guess, find a recovery path?
For me, it was really important to understand that I had an addiction because it's
Mm.
so. Um, I mean, it was hard to accept that I had a sugar addiction because most people say having a sugar addiction is like having an alcohol addiction or drug addiction, uh, but it's the same, and that's what I needed to learn. So I was trying for a whole year. I got a book that wrote, Bitten Jonsson, her first copy of Sugar Bomb in Your Brain. It was in Swedish, and it was a lot of recipes in it and so on. And then she didn't go. She wasn't recommending the way of eating that we eat now.
Oh,
But I was,
really?
yeah, it was a lot of. I'm eating very low carb,
Yeah.
keto-ish now, and then it was a lot of carbs, really. But
So
I
she didn't
took the
quite
recipe.
understand that the carbs break down into sugar. So there was that, it was more just
No,
sugar. Yeah?
sugar-free and grain-free,
Yeah.
but still it was whole grain and so on. So I had a
Ah,
lot of
okay.
cravings. I still had a lot of cravings.
Yeah,
So, but
yeah.
I did a year, following the recipes like a slave. It was my Bible, that book, and I was only eating what the recipes in that book and so on. So what happened is my body started to change. I lost weight, and I also already then felt that my mental health was improving. I was feeling happier, and I could, you know, enjoy life in a different way, and so on. But then I relapsed because I was still having all these cravings because of all the carbs and so on.
Mm,
And then that relapse, I almost didn't survive that one. So that's when I sought out Bitten and asked her for help, and she did this sugar interview with me and telling me you have an addiction. And I was also no, it wasn't her doing the interview; it was a coworker of her.
mm,
But anyway, I understood that I have an addiction, and I think that really, to understand that I have an illness was very crucial for my recovery, because at that point I realized it's not my fault. I thought that that I wasn't strong enough. I didn't have the kind of character I needed to stay off sugar and follow a
mm.
food plan or whatever. But then I learned it's not my fault, and I just didn't have the tools for recovery or for eating the way I needed to do and so on. Because that's part of the addiction. I knew that I was overweight. I knew that I had to change my way of living and eating and everything, but I wasn't able to do it by myself. So, and that's one of the definitions of addictions, that you keep doing what's hurting you and what's causing illness and everything, even though you know you have an addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Something that you said that I find interesting, because at the moment I'm doing a big deep dive into understanding oxytocin and vasopressin, which I'm learning are kind of the most important hormones, in our body. And oxytocin is an anti-inflammatory, vasopressin is an inflammatory hormone. But what's interesting is that um, sugar, and I would say, because we know all carbs are broken down into sugar. So sugar, carbohydrates are they actually dysregulate oxytocin. So it's no surprise when you were talking about, so you had an addiction, but your brain, was literally hijacked by, the environment, the food that you were eating. So there wasn't, oxytocin is part of, our cocktail of wanting to live, of love, of
mm,
of this depth that you started to talk about, when we first started, that you now have, that you didn't have. So it's so interesting. I think people focus on the behavioral side of it so much, but they miss the biology because it's so mirrored in our biology. You know, these types of things. So of course it's not your fault, and willpower, which I think is a word that came to mind when you're talking about,
yes, yeah,
yes, that, and you do so well being English is not your first language, but you're amazing the way that you're English anyway. But yeah, like that's what we tend to think, and we live in that for so long. It's my fault. I'm not strong enough. I'm not disciplined enough. Well, whatever we tell ourselves, but it's nothing to do with that at all. But there is an element of responsibility that we have to take if we decide to go down that path of recovery. Is that right?
yeah, that's absolutely
Mm,
right. And I think the biochemistry part is what most people are kind of missing when when you think about recovery, or when you start to recover. You think you can do it with willpower, like you said, only, but you really need to address all parts,
yeah.
because the addiction really affects all parts of your life. And what's even interesting when you're thinking about biochemistry and oxytocin, it's also a part of, I mean, sugar addiction has many phases. It can look in many ways. And one of the ways that one of my outlets is that I'm a volume addict. I need to eat a lot. And that's
Okay.
because I don't need to, but my brain thinks I need to. And one of the ways, what we have discovered is that some people really don't have oxytocin naturally. We have a lack of oxytocin. And when we eat, our stomach I don't know the word in English, but it expands, and
Yeah.
that creates oxytocin, relaxing, blah blah blah, all the stuff that it does. So that's one of the parts that I need to work with in recovery, how to create oxytocin without eating a lot, overeating, whatever.
That's
And that was so.
fascinating.
I think that yeah, that's really
Mm.
fascinating. And what we also discovered is that actually there is a special gene. This is very early. We really started to look into this, but there is a special gene that Labradors have it. The dog breed
Yeah.
Labradors that
Yeah.
always eat, and that you can see it in some people also have
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
that you can stop eating kind of stuff. So that's also something, and it's biochemistry. It's so interesting, and
Mm.
it's really, to discover these things and to understand that, and also it brings another layer of it's not my fault. I still have
Yeah.
the responsibility if I want to recover. I need to do the work, but it's also like, I'm not a bad person. It's not
Mm.
lack of willpower. It's not that I'm not doing well enough or whatever. I can
Mm.
just relax into being a good person and doing all the work I need to do, so to say, and with support from others. That's so important.
Yes.
That's really
Yes.
that's really important. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's wonderful what you do here, creating the thriving place for having people getting together to support each other, to have knowledge, and to, the support is so essential for uh, getting to know yourself and for recovery. I wouldn't have been in recovery if I didn't have my squad. You're part of my squad when I recovered to, you know um, tape or record a message on WhatsApp and listening to where you were at and telling what I'm feeling and thinking and so on. It's really wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, it is important, isn't it? I think that actually can be one of the challenges because there's a lot of cultural conditioning to, and certainly with if there's trauma, which we know there will be, in there as well, that we do it ourselves. That if we ask for help or we lean on other people, it's a sign of weakness. What would you say around something like that?
That's difficult. That's really difficult, and it's still something that I'm working with today. But I really found people that I can be open with and human with. I mean, we're all. It's not our strength that brings us together. It's our weaknesses when we can share that and being honest. And what I also learned is that I have to share these things, otherwise they will kind of grow. When I'm hiding that I'm not strong enough or whatever, or hiding my fears, hiding that I'm afraid of something, or that I'm really that nice, not that nice person I want to be, or whatever. I do bad things. And when I'm not sharing that, that's when they grow and kind of overwhelm me, and I start, you know, it's kind of reactivating some traumas sometimes,
Yeah,
or things
yeah.
that you've said or done before.
Mm,
What's
mm.
important also to mention when it comes to addiction is that addiction isn't caused by anything. Addiction is a primal disease. It's not
Primary?
caused primary. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not caused by anything, but the things that you experience, like traumas, if you have been um, experienced traumas in your childhood or in your life, that's what kind of driving the disease, so to say.
Mm, mm.
When you keep going back, the patterns you learn, because you don't have the coping strategies. When if you are an addict, and I was an addict from, I think we could see it from 3 years old or something with sugar. Then you don't have the coping strategies in life, and you are most likely to experience traumas because you really don't know how to handle life, and probably it's very common that your parents don't they're not able to cope with life either because they didn't have the strategies, so to say. I'm not blaming my parents for anything, but I just want to show the drive of addiction, so to say.
Yeah.
And of course, the more severe trauma, the more easier you get back to in those loops, so to say. So that's why when you work with addiction recovery, you need to, oh, I lost the words, when you about relapse prevention, then you really need to look at those things, what's happening. You don't have to dive into the trauma. You can do that also with when you have started your recovery and been there for a while. I think it's necessary to go back and work that through. But what you need to know, to learn, is to see how that affects you and how it makes you go back to the food or whatever you're using, alcohol or exercising, or whatever you choose to use, so to say.
Mm.
So that's a very different way of looking at things, because some say that it's
It
caused by trauma.
yes. Yeah, yeah. But what I find interesting, too is and I'm doing a spotlight session. I'm doing a session tomorrow because, I've been, delving into oxytocin, but what I'm looking at, I'm really interested in is innate activation. So I think a lot of us think it's about, yes, cuddling your dog or getting it from externally, and we do need external support. It's obviously part of human beings.
Yeah.
We're social creatures, and often internal shutdown prevents us from being social and
Mm,
making connections and things like that. But there's a theory with attachment theory that talks about the eyes being where we first learn safety as a baby, and if we have had a caregiver who hasn't, like you touched on, might not have that themselves, might not be safe within themselves, and not able to give that gaze to the baby, that can
mm,
actually be where oxytocin starts to, go awry. We haven't got that first, safety from. And it's not woo woo. It's actually been, well, it
yeah.
is scientific. It's been studied that the importance of our, early life is really
Mm,
foundational. And when you were talking about eating as being, like creating oxytocin and not having, my mind just went to that. I think that's it's such an interesting part of the whole framework of healing. That I think sometimes we might stay in areas that are a little bit more comfortable and neglect areas that are a little bit more challenging. But the
mm.
tapestry of healing requires, I think, yeah, it's a bit of it is a tapestry. There's many layers and
It sure is.
mm,
It's like peeling an onion. You have layers and
mm,
layers, Yeah.
yes,
That's what we
yeah,
used to say. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
So, yeah.
I was going to ask you, so if, in the thriving place there, I have to say probably most members have been on this path for a little while and have a pretty good, understanding of sugar addiction, in that they know it exists, and there are definitely sugar addicts in recovery within the thriving place. But I'm curious as to what would be some of the signs of sugar addiction. What are we looking for?
Before we had the tool of sugar, the interview, we used to say, if you hide, lie, and sneak with something.
Right.
Uh, so for me, it was like, when I had my binges, or when I'd been eating, I was hiding all signs of it, and hiding, like wrappers and stuff in the bottom of the trash bin,
Yeah.
or I was hiding my food, or I was hiding that I had been eating, and I was lying about it. No, I didn't eat it, or I never eat that stuff, and so on. And also, the sneaking. I could drive in my car and eating so no one would see
Yeah.
me. Or when my kids were small, my two oldest kids were small, and I was still active, I was hiding away from them eating, because I didn't want them to see that I was eating, and so on. But you could say, there are three groups that we kind of split people into when we talk about addiction. And the first part, they are what we call normies. You know, they can eat a piece of chocolate and forget that they have it. Strange people.
Who are those
I've never
people?
been able to do that. Yeah, who are they?
Me neither.
Aliens, you know.
Yeah,
Well, they can eat a piece or not if they
yeah.
kind of. Well, I had, you know, I had a cookie yesterday, so I don't need one today. And I'm like, what, you know? And then there is another group of people who they have consequences. You know, they might develop diabetes and type 2, and they gain weight and so on. But if something happens in their life, like if they have diabetes, they meet someone and fall in love, and you know, they that could be a big game changer for them, and they can change their lives
Okay.
and starting eat healthy and so on. But if you have an addiction, it's like you have diabetes type 2, you have heart disease, you meet someone and fall in love and you want to lose weight and so on, but you still can't do it because your brain is kidnapped, really,
Yeah, yeah.
and hijacked. So there are signs, you know, regarding weight, but you don't necessarily have to be overweight. You can also be underweight, anorectic. A part of sugar addiction is also that you're not eating. I have a wonderful friend in recovery, and when something happens in my life, I want to eat. I want to eat a lot. And when something happens in her life, she doesn't want to eat. She wants to take everything away. She wants to starve herself.
Wow.
So that's also biochemistry. I
Mm,
mean, your primary drug of choice, so to say. That's also one of the parts that was very essential for me to learn, because I thought that all people had cravings, you know, like I have when I'm
mm,
getting obsessed with food and I really need to eat something. And you can't describe craving. But I thought everyone had that, and that me not being able to resist was my lack of willpower, you know.
yeah,
But that's
yeah.
not true. Some people don't have it. It's so unfair. They don't have cravings, you know. So that's one part, you know, the cravings. You really can't resist the cravings. And also that you need to have more and more. I need more to have the same effect
Effect.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You know, keep eating even if you're getting ill, and doing it repeatedly and stuff like that,
Mm.
really.
Mm.
Mm.
I think there's some pretty big signs in there, like certainly in my experience with addiction, that it's the honesty that, you know, we kind of make excuses, and we, as you say, hide and do whatever we can to really confront the truth that, you know, there is an illness there. And, unfortunately, in society, I mean, it isn't generally considered an illness. It's much more a behavioral thing again. They're bad
Mm,
people. Like there was obviously, the sugar is, we call it that gateway drug that, kind of,
exactly.
yeah, led down to other things. And that's what parents don't realize. I mean, sugar is everywhere. As we know, the drug dealers are everywhere.
Mm,
My boys with their soccer, there's always lolly snakes and sweets and everywhere. It is everywhere. And
mm,
unfortunately, we can't change that. This comes back to the acceptance of it. So, it's about education and understanding. But I think so many parents, again, they're doing their best, but they don't understand just that
no,
biochemical, what it's doing to their brain.
absolutely. And I think it's very, I was thinking just what you said, that sugar is the gateway drug. And also, you know, in recovery, I've been to many 12-step groups, and people that I meet who have other drugs as their drug of choice. They might not see it themselves, but from what I see, always started with sugar in some way. Although they can see, maybe they used heavier drugs, so they can't really
Yeah.
see the connection, because the heavier drugs like alcohol and drugs, that's what made them. How shall I say? That's what really made the consequences in their lives. But if you look back from when they were young, they always started with sugar in some way, you know. Maybe it went very fast from eating sugars to started drinking and you know, tobacco and smoking, and here in Sweden we have snus snuff. So it's very common, that's where it starts, you know. if you
Yeah.
can follow the line, it's always sugar and then some kind of tobacco and alcohol, and then you go to
Yeah.
heavier drugs. And one
Yeah.
thing that we will have to deal with it now is screen, from our kids. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about oxytocin and the
Mhm.
crucial thing of meeting your child's
Mhm.
eyes, meeting the gaze, and so on. That's one of the things, when you talk about trauma, I'm not very good at it, but I mean, you have small t's, small traumas, and big traumas. And what they see now with the screen is that every time your child is coming to you asking for your attention and you're focused on your screen, your phone, whatever, that causes small t's, small traumas when you don't meet them. And when you
Yeah.
often what you see, I'm living in the countryside, obviously, but when I go to the cities, I very often see parents turning their children away from them. Their front in the
Yeah.
wagon or the trolley. They're
Mhm.
turning them away, and they have a screen, and in the other hand, they have something, a
Like,
squeezy or whatever. So they
yeah.
don't even have to need to they don't even use their teeth, their mouth, their yeah. So not
Yeah.
looking, not meeting them, putting a screen in front of them, and then a little squeezy. They don't even have to chew or use their mouth. I it scares me. We will have to deal with that later, really.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. I hadn't even made that. I mean, I've made the connection with, screens and, dopamine, because dopamine's interconnected with oxytocin as well. I mean,
Yes.
it's an
Yes.
incredible tapestry, but I hadn't actually made that connection with eye contact and the way you talked about little t's. That's a incredibly a powerful way to talk about it to help parents today realize, because again, I think it became a tool where, if I look in the context of my kids, so my eldest is 24 and my youngest is 11, so my younger
Oh,
two boys have grown up with an iPad access, whereas with my older ones, it didn't exist back then. So,
yes. Yeah.
they were running around, they were noisy. I did give him grapes and sultanas. I did my best,
I did
but
that too.
things to be
Yeah.
quiet, pacified him with food. But
Mm.
I think then this stuff has become that tool where parents, it is a babysitter, it quietens them, and I get it. You don't want to go. Who wants to
Yeah.
go out to a restaurant and kids are running around crazy? It's what they're meant to be doing. They're meant to be boisterous, but I
Mm.
think it is so, so challenging. And if I had to say the most challenging thing with the constantness of, can I have a phone? Can I have an iPad? I want to play my iPad. I want to play, like, as a parent having to, no one said it was ever going to be easy. So first of all, there's an acceptance. Okay, parenting is one of the hardest things we'll ever do, but it is that
Yes.
constantness of it, because like a drug, right? Even reels, right? Reels are changing their brain, making them lowering their
Yes.
attention span. They can't find it hard to sit and watch movies because of the, reels, blah, blah, blah. But it's something that we just have to, that and diet, food. It's so, you feel so like you are the crazy mom or the odd one out or whatever. But when you know what we know, I can't, and I've said this to my boys. I said, you know what? Mummy's taught you about sugar. Mummy's taught you about iPads. Mummy's taught you about this stuff. Would I be being a good mum and just by just saying, yeah, go and do, go and eat whatever everyone else is eating and go and, so I managed to kind of, I think by, it's drip feeding. I think they get it, but I think if they could choose, they would like to just go and,
Mm,
have all the crap that their
of
friends are having
course.
and sit on their iPad all weekend.
Mm. Sure, sure. And I can see the difference. Like you said, my oldest, she's also 24. She's turning 24 in a week. And my youngest, like I said, she's 16, turning 17. And, those 7 years between them,
Mm,
something really exploded, with
yeah,
screens and phones and everything.
yeah,
Because my oldest, she was 12, 13, something before. And then my son, she was he was, 2 years, he's 2 years younger. So they were kind of, how shall I say, protected from the screen.
Protected.
It wasn't,
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't in that way when they were growing up.
Mm.
But when their little sister arrived, it was screens all over already.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and I think that's, like I said, I think we'll have to pay. We'll have to deal with that, our generation, because
yeah,
what we can see is that people tend to get addicted earlier.
yeah,
It's like we said, sugar is the gateway drug, and that almost always starts even in the womb, because of
yeah,
what the mother is eating. And then when they're born, you have the screen before they even
yeah,
open their eyes, and
yeah.
then you have the tobacco. So what we have now is another drug that you give them very early besides the food. I think I've been
Mm.
saying this for years. People thought that I'm a lunatic, Ah, you always see drugs all over and everything is so bad and so on. But I've been seeing this, and I've been saying that this is going to be difficult, and so difficult to recover from. I mean, that's one of the drugs that I'm actually having a hard time with. I need to use my phone, but I'm
Yeah,
getting stuck there all the time because of my
yeah,
addicted brain, who wants to get hooked on things. So
yeah,
I'm trying all kinds of strategies. You don't have social media on the phone, but all of a sudden it's there again. It's so strange.
yeah,
What
yeah.
happened?
Yes, yes. I know,
Uh,
I know. I resonate with that as well. And I think that's the thing we have to see in the recovery process too. It is it's not understanding this intimate biochemistry and what's changing that. I think that's where we're going to find a lot of eventually, because I think people know, parents feel it, people feel it, but they don't know what to do about it and they don't know how to change
mm,
it. But things like there are schools, certainly in Australia now, because it went to, every school, every kid, every classroom had an iPad and, everything was
yes.
on a
Yeah.
laptop. But now that's actually, it's slowly being reversed, and that's what'll happen because kids can't read or write properly. They can't think for
No.
themselves because of AI and all this sort of stuff. So I think it will swing. I believe in human nature, and I think we have this inbuilt wisdom that tells us we're going off track a little bit, and we probably have to go quite far off track before it comes back again. But I do think with people, more and more people starting to understand, the biochemistry
Mm,
of it and what it's doing. And you only have to hear, people that invented the iPads and stuff talk about none of their children go to schools where they have access to it because they
yeah.
know exactly what it's doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And like you said, I think it's also important to understand the nature of addiction interaction disorder, about swapping things. Okay,
yes.
I don't eat sugar, then I'm on the phone, and I'm not on the phone, then I'm, I don't know, over exercising or shopping or whatever. That you really need to be aware of, that addiction can take place in so many things, or
Yeah. Yeah.
shapes. So, but also, like you said, I think it's going to be, we have to reverse the screens. It's the same in Sweden. The authorities here in Sweden are, looking at, not allowing children to have phones with them to school and so
Mm,
on. And I think it's good because they really see it's a health problem.
yeah. Yeah.
So it's slowly changing, but something is happening, which I'm happy about that, really.
Yes. Yes. Me
Yeah.
too. What would be one thing or some things that you just wish everybody knew about sugar addiction?
That it exists and it's a
That
real
exists.
addiction. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
because so many people, like, I still feel, when I'm with my squad, or talking to people who know about sugar addiction or recover from sugar addiction, everybody's, they're kind of cool with that. It's an addiction and you recover from it and so on, and you eat in a certain way. But when I meet people in the real society, outside my door, They're like, oh, she's that crazy woman. She's not eating that. She's not doing that. She's not
Yeah.
drinking. She's not,
Mhm.
while I'm having a wonderful life because I don't have to do that anymore. So I think I want people to understand that it's an addiction and it's a lethal disease. You have to have the respect that it's a disease, it's an illness, and you really have to treat it with care, handle it with
Yeah.
care, so to say. And
Yeah.
it's real.
Yeah.
And also, it's like I said, it's progressive. There are so many things you need to learn about sugar addiction, but the most important thing is that you can recover from it. I think
Yeah.
that's the most important part.
Yeah. So what would be the hardest parts of recovery though? What
I think the hardest part was to understand that it affects all the areas of my life. Uh, the year before I really had my huge relapse, I was only changing my food. I didn't change anything else. I wasn't entering recovery because recovery and abstaining from sugars and carbs is not the same thing. Like I said, I
Yeah.
went to 12 steps groups, and that's where I met, the spirituality, and where I got the tools for changing the way. It's like, you can't think your way into change. You have to act your way into change. And that's where I got the tool how to act, how to take care of what's inside of me, what I have done, all the guilt and the shame that I was carrying. And that's where I met my squad and learned that I need people around me to recover. I have to talk about all these crazy thoughts that I'm having, the crazy stuff that I'm doing, and everything. So we talk about community being 50% of the recovery. So it's that important. 10% is about, knowledge and biochemistry and everything. And 40% is about keep learning about addiction and education and so on. And 50% is having the community around you. So that's really, really important. You can't do it by yourself. You can't sit on your butt by yourself and recover. It's
Yeah.
impossible.
I love how you said that recovery is just not the abstinence of it, because you could put that into, well, it's the same with alcohol and, gambling. It's not just
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
not doing it
Yeah.
anymore, but it has to go to that deeper spirituality, or, I suppose there's many consciousness, there's many words that you kind of, talk to the same thing. But I think that's really what my purpose is. That's the stuff that I love helping people with the most, because it you see, like I said before, you see people certainly in the space, the sort of, keto, low carb, carnivore space,
Mm,
that
mm.
think it is just about abstinence, that if I,
Yes.
am not having it, then I'm recovered. But then life tends to happen in the way that it does, and you alluded to this in your recovery. We get sidetracked, or something happens, in life that sweeps us off our feet, and we have no ability to. We haven't developed a new way of dealing with it and managing our internal weather, for want of a better word. So then, the relapse is there if we haven't done that kind of, internal work and really learnt strategies.
And that's also, I mean, one important thing, that's a part of active addiction is the obsession with stuff. I can still get obsessed with stuff, but if you have an addiction and you stop eating sugar and carbs and so on, you change the way of eating, you can easily, how shall I say, spot people in those areas, like you said, keto communities or low carb communities, because they are still obsessed with the food.
Mm,
Usually they want to learn how to do bakeries the low carb way or keto way. They want to
yeah.
eat, like keto bread or whatever. I don't say
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not saying it's not good, but you can spot them. And also the obsession with learning. They dive into stuff and they are getting like all the small pieces, all the details, and they tend to like hit people with it. And they they are still obsessed. They're not alive. They're just whoa into
Yeah.
the new drug. It's not like, I mean, and of course they recover because they eat good food, so they're getting healthier, but their minds are not changing. They're
No, and
still
I think
behaving.
that's where
Yeah.
stress or, the nervous system dysregulation, all
Mm,
this other stuff that people aren't addressing. They wonder
yeah.
then, "Oh, hang on, my cortisol or my insulin's gone up or my HbA1c's gone up,
Mm,
but I'm not eating the sugar anymore." And that's so fascinating what you were saying, because I guess I hadn't, articulated it in that way. But when you say it, it's exactly what happens. I mean, that was me. That was
yeah.
100%.
Been there, done that. Yeah.
Yes. So there's no judgment in, of course, anything that we're
No,
saying, but
no.
I think it's just that, you know, I suppose just seeing, we can't see it till we see it. And when, we can see others doing it, but until they kind of get the light, to see that,
Yeah,
oh,
but I
that's
think
what
it's
I'm doing.
because we've been there. I wouldn't have been able
Yeah.
to see it if I hadn't been there.
Yeah.
So it's like you say, it's no judgment in it. It's
Mm.
just that I can see it because I've done there, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt,
Yeah.
all the crazy stuff. I've done it.
I love it. I love it. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
me too. Me too. Such I think we connect with beautiful souls on our journey, and there's a reason for it. And I'm just so I love our connection, and I love the fact that you are willing to be here in the Thriving Place with us. And I think that's a wonderful idea. If you're happy to hang around in the Thriving Place, for questions that people might have around this, and maybe we organize next month or whenever it suits you, like we'll do a more of a Zoom Q&A, so you can show up,
Yeah.
and if people want to talk to you, or like I do, just love picking your brain about different things. And because I think I love teaching and coaching, because it just allows me to put the threads together. I think
Yes.
it is a gift. We learn as we teach. So yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's the wonderful part. I think, when we're doing like this, and I talk about something and you talk about something, and you can literally see, the dots connecting. It's wonderful. And
yeah,
that's also what's happening in recovery because that's also one of the parts why I love doing this. When I have a client, I meet them for the first time, and then you start to teach or to coach or, give bits of information and knowledge and so on, and then you meet after 4 weeks or after 2 weeks or 1 week, and you literally you see that the light has gone on. You can see the glow in their eyes, and they're sitting in a different way, they're talking in a different way, and it's so wonderful. It's the yeah it's really when you can bring something to someone that really turns their lives uh on, the light on. It's
the light
wonderful.
on.